Welcome to episode 185 of the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. This is Melisa Liberman, and today I am so excited because I have a guest who is going to share with you a wealth of knowledge as an independent consultant. Her name is Gabrielle Tenaglia. She is a fractional CMO and also the fractional head of marketing at a company called Lettuce, and she's here to share with us so many best practices as it relates to her having run her own business over the last 7 years total, and also the work that she does with independent consultants through the company that she'll share with us that's called Lettuce. So without further ado, Gabrielle, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited you're here. And why don't you give us a better introduction than I just gave for you?
I'm
Tell us
thrilled.
everything about yourself.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Melissa. I am a career marketer. I spent the first part of my career over 20 years working in agencies and got to work on some amazing businesses, huge global clients like Xbox and Audi and Intel and Workday across B2B and consumer. And I also got to work with a lot of smaller, nimble businesses being based in the Bay Area. There's always startups or companies that are scaling, like Pandora or different software companies that were growing at the time. And then when I left about 10 years ago, I started working inside of different startups or scaling organizations. I got to work with Lyft and BetterUp, and I spent some time inside Hims and Hers consulting and have really enjoyed those experiences. I now am consulting after another full-time stint. I've been consulting with a financial services company called Lettuce that actually serves independent consultants, fractionals, and freelancers.
I love that because it's always such a pleasure to talk with you. You and I've had a lot of conversations. We first met at a forum for marketplace executives that where everyone's so focused on the future of work and how to connect enterprise clients and mid-sized clients and even small startup clients with freelancers and independent consultants. And I thought it would be so fun to bring you on, Gabrielle, because you have such an interesting perspective to share with the independent consultant audience, because you are an independent consultant yourself, and you also work with a client who is a software company who services independent consultants. So it's such a good kind of 360 view of this space, and so excited to hear your insights today. One of the things that stands out to me so much about the conversations we've had in one way is the story you tell about, when you were first an independent consultant and overpaid your taxes, and like kind of that lesson learned from that. Let's start off there, especially as we're coming into the end of a quarter and tax estimates are due. Would love to hear that perspective on what happened when you've overpaid those taxes and how that's kind of driven a lot of the decisions you've made for your consulting business from moving forward.
Yes. I love telling this story, Melissa, because it reminds me in kind of a humbling way of the different mistakes that I've made over the course of my career in trying to manage my own consulting business, and makes me feel good about what I know now and how I can share what I've learned to help other people build more successful, more stable businesses. I've been a consultant 4 different times in my career. This is my fourth chapter, sorry. And as you've mentioned, it's been about 7 or 8 years total that I've consulted over the course of my career. And during that time, as you mentioned, I've been a chronic overpayer of taxes. And I didn't overpay my taxes because I was doing things wrong or because I didn't know what it was that I was supposed to do to save. I did all of the things. I kept spreadsheets of my invoices and my expenses. I had envelopes full of receipts for years. I did all of the DIY things in my early fractional career and made sure I was adding the numbers together and putting them in the right boxes in the tax forms. And then as I earned more money and as I knew a bit more, I had QuickBooks, which I struggled to learn, and I eventually hired a bookkeeper to
Mm.
manage my monthly P&L for me so that I could know each month what was happening in QuickBooks, how much I had spent. And even though I was doing all of that work, I never really saved that much in taxes. I remember in particular one meeting with an accountant who was doing my taxes who was like, "This is so great. You saved $2,000 with all those deductions." And I just remember thinking, I spent so many hours of my time managing that process and doing all that work and making sure I had all those receipts. I can't believe all of that time added up to $2,000.
Mm.
It was frustrating and disappointing, and I got to a point where I just thought, "You know what? I'm gonna invest as little in this as possible because it doesn't really matter." And then the last time I was freelancing, my financial advisor said to me, "You're paying way too much in taxes. Your business is doing really well. You're earning more this year than you have in a long time. You need an S-Corp." And I was like, "Great, whatever, something else that's gonna take all my time and not save me very much money." And I was like, "What am I really gonna save with an S-Corp? Tell me what this is all about." And she explained it to me and explained the process. And it was about $20,000 for me. And at the time, I had young kids, and I thought like, "Oh, that's a preschool tuition. That's
Mm.
real. That's
Yeah.
worth doing some work for." I said, "Okay, what do I have to do to make this happen?" And she explained the paperwork that you have to file with the state and with the IRS. I was like, "Okay, I can fill out forms, it's fine." And then she explained that in order to actually get the savings, I would have to pay myself payroll. So I'd
Mm.
have to determine a reasonable salary for myself. I'd have to pay myself payroll on a regular basis. I needed to file a bunch of paperwork with the state and make sure I was paying the correct payroll taxes in the state of California where I live. And she's like walking through this process, and I'm thinking, I have to pay payroll on the money that my clients have already paid me and is sitting in my bank account. This is crazy. I'm working 60 or 70 hours a week doing work that I actually love. You are describing work that I hate
Mhm.
and can't find the time to do. Like, that would literally be sacrificing my weekends to figure these things out. And I said, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to trade my time and my sanity for that $20,000, and the IRS can have it.
Mm.
And so when I first reconnected with our founder at Lettuce, Ron Harpaz, and he told me what he was doing, he said, "Oh, I'm
Mm.
working on this new thing. We're going to automate S Corps for independent businesses." And I thought, "Oh my God, that's the most amazing thing I've heard in a long time. I want to do this with you." And so I get to be part of a business and building a product that's something I really needed and wanted to use
Yeah.
in my career, which is always really exciting and fulfilling to be able to do that.
Absolutely. And to take out the complication for independent consultants, because most of us don't want to deal with this like you just described, and the more automated it can be, and to capture those types of cost savings or types of tax savings, if you will be so beneficial. So I'm excited to talk about so many things you just brought up, Gabrielle. Maybe we can start with your career as an independent consultant, if you're game to share your decision making process. I think a lot of us are really fascinated by this concept of kind of going back and forth between corporate roles and consulting roles. Sometimes there's a little bit of shame around it, in the sense of going back to corporate might feel like you're giving in a little bit, or that you didn't succeed as a business owner. But I love this idea of there is flexibility to go back and forth depending
Yeah.
on what it is you want in your career. So if you're game to share a little bit about what your decision making process has been as you've gone back and forth and what that's looked like, I think that could help so many consultants as they're thinking about maybe doing the same.
I think that I'm really lucky that as a marketer, there has long been a lot of flexibility in how you manage your career. And for almost as long as I've worked in marketing, there's been a real acceptance of freelancers being able to come into agencies or environments and help companies during their busy periods. Agencies that are pitching or marketers that have seasonal businesses and they need extra hands on deck for strategy planning or, helping ramp up. So I have been able to balance those freelance and full-time periods of my career based on what was happening in my personal life. I
Mm,
have kids and was able to decide that I needed not to work less, but I needed more flexibility than a traditional full-time job often allows, or that I wanted to learn something different. Having these periods of fractional work where I could work with different kinds of clients or different kinds of businesses where I hadn't had experience before has given me breadth and depth in
mm,
my career
yeah,
that I think a lot of folks who stick with more traditional full-time stints don't always get to have. It depends a bit on the kind of company that they work in or the kind of structure that they have in their job. And it's been, I think I'm lucky that it's been relatively easy for me to be able to make that decision to go back and forth because as a marketer, it's just more acceptable than I think it has been in the past for other kinds of fields. I think that is changing dramatically today. And I see so many people in other fields who are doing this. And I do think
mm,
you're right that people don't always realize that you can go back and forth, that you don't have to make the decision once and say, like, it has to be like this forever. And I find if companies aren't open to hiring people who are freelancing, it's their loss, actually.
yeah,
And because I think the experience that we bring to the table, the more entrepreneurial attitude, the learning that we get from working this way is tremendous and can have a huge impact inside an organization.
yeah.
And when you're freelancing, people appreciate the experience that you've had in-house, so you can go back and forth now in a way that you couldn't before.
Yeah. I think just opening up that idea that it's not one or the other. Of course, I would recommend staying as a consultant because that's what I love and that's what I do and that's what I've done for 12 years. But if some opportunity comes along, there's no shame in going back to corporate for a while and then coming back again. And I think the fact that you've done this 4 times shows a lot of fluidity around the ability to take whatever opportunities make the most sense, like you said, for your business and for your life at that time. One of the other things you mentioned is the fact that you're a fractional head of marketing right now for lettuce, and also you have that's what you do. You're a fractional CMO, and there are so many consultants out there that want to really get into more fractional type work rather than perhaps more project based work or staff augmentation type work. Tell us a little bit, Gabrielle, about how you go about acquiring your clients and what it looks like to offer that type of fractional service.
Yeah, and I will be honest that I do all of those things.
Yeah.
And, I do projects for some clients, I have fractional arrangements with others, sometimes I do staff augmentation, and it depends a little bit on what do I want? Is this a
Mm,
client who I really want to work with? For some reason, there's a learning experience, I like the client, I like the work, and so I'm willing to be more flexible in how I work with them. And it also depends on the other things I have happening in my business. If I have 1 or 2 stable fractional pieces happening at one time, it gives me the flexibility to do some shorter term project work for another client because that's a perfect fit in the mix in that moment.
mm,
So, what I often say is that when someone is interested or reaches out about work, I always say yes until I have to say no. There's a
mm,
lot of times that projects or work or clients come my way that aren't a perfect fit. Either they want a project and I'm looking for something fractional in that moment, or they have an assignment that's not exactly in my wheelhouse. It's not the kind of work that I'm really best at where I can deliver the most value. And I always have those conversations and try to shape the
mm,
assignment into something that fits what I need, that fits what I'm good at, where I can deliver more value. And I always continue those conversations until there's a point where it's just not going to work. I think sometimes in this kind of exploration, people feel like, well, this is the thing that I'm looking for. I'm fractional. I want this kind of agreement, or I want this kind of project. And so they don't try to influence
mm,
what the project could look like. And I have ended up finding that the fractional clients for me often come out of project work. I'll do project work or
mm,
agree to do a certain number of hours over a period of time to help them define the problem or define the work that they need to do as an organization. And then a fractional agreement can come on top of that.
Yeah. I love that description of a kind of a client journey, right? Where it could be you start off with a project and then that builds into a retainer. Sometimes
Yes.
we think about things very black and white. I'm either a fractional this or a project based that. And I love the way you just described that, Gabrielle. The other thing that I love what you just described about is oftentimes on this podcast, I talk a lot about the make it work business model, where someone comes to you and says, I want this project, and you start talking yourself into it and then end up taking it because you're worried that you're not going to have
Mhm,
another
mhm.
opportunity. And we end up doing all these things we don't want to do and being underpaid. And what you just described is a lot about shaping the engagement to make it what you want it to be, or to decide you've kind of followed the thread and it's not going to turn out the way it's not going to fit your
Yep.
qualification criteria. Tell us a little bit more about what techniques do you use to shape those engagements into something that those types of engagements you would be excited to take on.
That's such a good question. And I will say I have found myself in those situations where I'm doing a project that is like not the right fit for me and it's not something I enjoy. And I took it because I think we all go through this. You go through
Yeah.
a quiet period and you kind of panic that there's not another project around the corner and that you need to make it work because you need the income. So I've
Yeah.
certainly done my share of that over the years. I think there's a couple of steps that I take, and this is such a good question because
Mm.
I haven't really thought about this in terms of writing it down or what are my techniques. But I
Yeah.
think the first is that I have a set of questions that I ask to try and understand about the client's business. A lot
Mhm.
of times people come looking for a tactic. I need a thing.
Mm.
And really, what is underneath that is that there are other problems in the business that they've decided they need this tactic to address, but it's not always the right choice or the only choice. There might be a different tactic or a different piece of work that could help them address the underlying problems potentially better than that specific tactic. So there's always first a process of really trying to understand. Okay, I understand you think you need a campaign or you need emails or you need some messaging, but what are you trying to do in the business that you think this piece of work is going to solve? And a lot of times, just that alone can help open up the discussion into other things.
Mm.
I think other times, after you've done a little bit of that discovery work, the other thing I try to do is offer ideas or suggestions about how to solve that problem. I'm not adverse to doing a little bit of work to get the kind of project that I really want. If it's going to mean putting some ideas on the table, writing some things up to help them make a better choice or help them understand the impact I can have, I'm often willing to do that.
I think sometimes we get into this mode of I shouldn't be giving free work or something like that at our own detriment, because then we end up shutting things down more quickly than perhaps was necessary, and deciding not to pursue projects a little bit too prematurely, or on the other hand just agreeing to whatever the client wants and then sending ourselves and the client down a path that might not be the most mutually beneficial. So I love that perspective that you just shared, Gabrielle, which is spending a little bit of time helping to shape the project so that it's really focused on the right outcomes versus what the client thinks they need versus what they do need, and also to make sure that it's a good fit for you and your client and the way you're using your capacity.
There's a content and SEO agency that I work with called Message Lab, and they're really excellent. And they say all the time is that you want people to first become consumers of your ideas
Mm.
so then they can become consumers of your products. And I think this works. Running your own consulting business works the same way. You need someone to engage with your ideas and like them and find the ideas useful,
Mm.
and then they will come and buy your products or your services. I think lots of folks do this really well in ways that I haven't yet for my own business, but put out content on LinkedIn. You have a lot of content that you're
Yeah.
written that you give away for free because you want people to align with the ideas that you're putting in the market so that they'll come and buy your services. And I think as consultants, that's a really great way to get business and make sure that you're getting the right kinds of clients. Because if they like your ideas, there's a better likelihood that there's a good fit.
Yeah, they come so much warmer, right? A lot
Yes.
of times I'll get on a call with a potential client and we've had a relationship. I didn't realize we were having a relationship, but we have a relationship because they've listened to so many episodes and have a good sense of my style. And I'm sure some people tune out because of the style as well.
Mhm.
But that's the key, is really to your point. How do you attract those types of clients who resonate with your ideas, who resonate with your style, and would want to engage you, or at least consider engaging you as a result of that? Yeah. Tell us a little bit, Gabrielle, if we switch gears here a little bit and put your marketing hat on now, and would love to hear more because you are a marketing expert. So many of us as independent consultants, we know we have to wear a marketing hat for our businesses, but it's not always the most favorite hat to wear or the one we feel most competent or capable wearing. And there's so many AI tools out there now that are starting to make marketing more available to those of us who are responsible for marketing our own businesses. So, would love to hear what you're recommending right now. What types of tools are you seeing as a CMO that can be beneficial to independent consultants?
Such a great question. So I have been really digging in over the past few months and thinking about more strategically how I can use AI to grow my own skill set, and then also what things we need to put in place as a team to make sure that we're
Mhm.
using AI in a way that helps scale everyone. And I think I've been doing more of the first right now versus the second because I feel like I needed to educate myself
Yeah.
first to see what I could do and what was useful. And I think part of that is there are a lot of things that you can do using AI and just get really bad outputs. And I think someone who I follow on LinkedIn early on said, like, AI is not going to make anything great, but it's going to raise
Mm,
the floor for people so that if you're like not that good, you can get better.
mm,
I am in a place right now where I totally disagree with that. I think it's completely possible to do lots of mediocre things with AI, but if you are good or great, the AI can 10x what you're able to do. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Like many businesses, we are trying to understand how do we get customers to pay attention to us when we are doing paid marketing, right? Lots of
yeah.
ads out there in the world. No one needs more ads. No one is looking to learn about your service, especially when it's about taxes. A lot of people,
Mm,
for most of the year, don't want to engage with any kind of content about taxes. It's not the most fun thing to learn about or engage with. I recently hired an amazing creative team, David Roth and Ronnie Allman, who have been experimenting with AI and doing a lot more work with
mm,
AI. And I said to them, we need to do something more interesting. We need to stop the scroll. We need to get people to stop and pay attention to what we have to say. And one of the reasons I hired them is because David has had some experience in writing musical numbers and he's done some really interesting work on his own. And they came up with a whole bunch of ideas for us, but the ones that I loved best were like mini musicals about S-Corps and taxes. And because of AI, we were able to make these ads that in any other environment, like using any kind of logic, I wouldn't have been able to greenlight because
mm,
if you can only make one thing as a marketer, which is often the case when you have to go out and produce something practically, I would have chosen something a little bit safer because a musical number is expensive to produce. For an early stage company like ours, it's pretty risky. And it would have been hard to justify. It would have been a huge risk. But given that it doesn't cost any more to produce a musical number than it does to produce something that's a little bit more straight and educational, We did it, and the performance has been incredible. They're the best performing pieces that we've produced in this quarter. So I think that if you're talented and willing to take a risk, that AI can make it easier for you to try lots of things and see if that risk is
Mm,
worth pursuing.
yeah.
So I think that's one way in which AI has been really exciting for us. And I'm certainly not the first person to say this, but AI is a multiplier. I feel like I have been able to, in the experimentation I've done and learning new things over the past few months, been able to 10x my skill set. And I'll give you one example. I have been very lucky over the course of my career to work with some incredible data and analytics folks. Marketing has tons of data, and it is very difficult on many occasions to get time and resources from those folks to look at your data to help you make recommendations. And I have been able to teach myself how to run linear regressions, how to run multivariate regressions using AI so that I can try to understand what's working and what's not working in our marketing mix. Now, certainly my AI regressions are not the last word in what we do and what we decide, but I am able to find early signals in the market that can help us decide where to do deeper investigation, where to focus, what other questions we might need to ask. And I can set us up for the data team to do more learning or build a better solution for us because I know where to look. I know where the
Mm.
heat is. I know where the signal is, and I can set it up for deeper investigation. In a past world, I never could have done that. I would have had to go with my data sheet and say, like, help me understand what's interesting here. And I could ask some questions and point them to the places where I have some hypotheses, but it would have been much harder to do. I feel as someone who loves data, but not math. I never would have been able to do something like this before. And it has made me feel like I'm able to get an understanding of the business that I wouldn't have had before, which is really powerful that I can do that on my own without having to rely on teams of people whose time is really valuable.
Yeah. Gabriella, what tool specifically are you using for this marketing data analysis? Is it ChatGPT or
I'm just
something
using
else?
ChatGPT for that. There's some other
Yeah.
tools that I've started to play with, not for that kind of data analysis, but for more traditional marketing work. There's
Mhm.
one tool that I've started playing with, and jury's out for me on it, not because I'm not sure if it's good, but I just haven't spent enough time with it. It's a tool called Ella, and it's by a company called Atomic Elevator.
Mm.
And they built a tool for marketers, and it's actually built for fractional marketers. They're also a fractional team who built this software for their own use. And then so many people started asking them about it. But it's interesting to me because it takes a lot of kind of classic marketing principles or frameworks, and they've built them into the prompts so that
Mm.
I can go to Ella, I can go to this tool and say, I need to start to develop a positioning and I want to use this method or this framework. They have frameworks built into the prompting so that it can help you have better outputs. And I think
Mm.
in the little bit that I've used it, it doesn't get you 100% of the way there, but it takes you 50 or 60% of the way there, which is a
Mhm.
huge time savings. And so it can set up a structure for me of something that I can then build on. And like I said earlier, because I know what I'm doing and I know the questions to ask, and I can
Mhm.
take something that's 60% good and improve it by another 60%, it's a multiplier for my time and my impact.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like for other marketing professionals would be something to test. What about those of us who are listening who are not marketing consultants? Is it something you think you would recommend, or do you think they should start with ChatGPT? What are your thoughts?
What I am learning is that it's all about prompting, right? The
Mm.
smarter your questions are, the better results that you get. And what's great about this Ella tool is that it's got some of the prompting work built in for you,
Mm.
right? And so it helps you if you're not a marketer, it helps you be better. I think you can ask a simpler question and get a better result than you would if
Mm,
you were asking ChatGPT, right?
yeah.
You don't need to have all of the knowledge to ask the question and get a better result. For ChatGPT, I think where I've seen the most success is where I've done some work to learn how to write better prompts and learn
Mhm.
how to build the framework that I want to see output into the question. So I imagine if you are trying to market yourself and trying to learn how to do that kind of marketing, how do I do better on LinkedIn? How do I make a LinkedIn strategy for myself? How do I write LinkedIn posts? How do I share my content, my ideas on LinkedIn so that people can get exposed to the thinking and the work that I do? There are definitely places that offer better prompts. In fact, there was one that I was playing with over the weekend, and I'm going to look and see if I can find it because this guy also has prompts about like he has marketing and sales prompts, but he also has some around doing your own work on LinkedIn and doing your posts. And I think his prompts are just really, really good. And he is, I'll give you a link so you can
Okay.
put it in you can put it in the show notes. But
That sounds good.
his name is Hassan bin Arshad, and I happened upon him on LinkedIn because someone who I follow had shared his
Mm,
prompts, and it's
yeah.
been great playing with them over the weekend. I did a bunch of really interesting work. And I think that the challenge is that there's so many of these things and it's hard to know which ones are good and which ones are
Yeah,
not until you really play with them, right?
that's right. Yeah.
I also have taken some like short just workshopy courses on prompt writing and I feel
Mhm.
like it's probably time for me to invest a little bit more time there because while I'm most interested in becoming a great marketer, right? That's what my
Yeah.
job is. That's where I add the most value. But there's some things around the edges, like this data analysis, where if I can take my knowledge from like here to 50%, I can
Yeah.
give better direction to the teams I work with. I can ask smarter questions about the data. So there's some things where I need to raise the floor in my own knowledge or my own skill set. And then
Mm.
the real value for me is the places where I'm going to go from like, hey, this is good to this is amazing.
This is amazing. Yeah. I love those framework or that thought process you just shared, Gabrielle. I mean, some of it is about efficiency. And then for me, for example, I was working with my SEO consultant this morning and we were talking about how to get some better data about my campaigns, some of the work we're doing. And we came up with some strategies that are very easy for me to then have my assistant take over, use ChatGPT to compare data and give us some better kind of reporting around some of the areas. So some of it has to do with efficiency and just like you said, figuring it out for yourself so then you can delegate it to someone else potentially, or it might just be so fast that you end up it's easy to do yourself.
Yeah, I think if I don't have to spend my energy getting from 0 to 50 and I can spend
Yeah,
my energy getting from 50 to 100, I'd rather do that
yeah.
because it's less effort for me to make something great.
That's right. And then I love that second component that you just shared, which is thinking about how do I leverage AI to 10x what I'm doing? How do I what when I think about what is the 10x and then how do I use AI, whether it's ChatGPT or a specialized tool, in order to create that 10x experience, whatever it is. I think it's such an interesting way of looking at this. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that behind the scenes with us. I do want to go back to something that you said because I think a lot of the listeners will have the question, which is, can we watch this ad that you were describing? I want to hear how you create turning an S-Corp into a song.
Yeah.
Can you share the link with us?
I will absolutely. We have
Okay.
2 pieces. They're very different from each other because, we're
Fun.
trying to test different things, and so
Yeah.
I will share them both. I now wanna make everything into a musical. That's my ambition, and so, look for more of that from us too. I will absolutely share those links.
Okay, amazing. That sounds good. Let's talk a little bit about taxes. No one wants to talk about taxes, but let's talk about taxes from the sense of how you can really automate this. And what have you learned specifically with lettuce as you've been helping to grow that company and how to leverage AI from that perspective, Gabrielle?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, This is the kind of work that I think AI is great for. I am the most valuable resource in my business. I have no expertise in taxes. I don't enjoy taxes. My time is much better spent on higher value activities, working with my clients, pitching new business, writing proposals, than it is spending hours trying to figure out which deductions I can take and which I can't. And so this is one of those places where AI can get you, where it can raise the floor. It can make me much smarter, much better, much more efficient at something that where I don't have deep knowledge and I don't need to. So I think that in running our own businesses, there are lots of places where we don't have expertise, right? And this is
Yeah.
an important one because it can cost you an incredible amount of money. And the thing that I really love about what we're doing at Lettuce is that most people just don't know about the additional tax strategies that they can take. My financial advisor, I was lucky. I happened to be in a circumstance where I had a financial advisor who knew about this and was encouraging me to do this. But most people don't know about S-Corps and what they can do. And we've built a bunch of tools that can help you understand what an S-Corp is, how it can impact your business, what you can save, and then can operationalize all the work. And I'll take
Mm.
just a second to describe how an S-Corp saves you money because a lot of folks don't know anything about this at all. Everyone who works in the United States pays Social Security and Medicare tax, just part of what we do. And when you're a W 2 employee, you pay half and your employer pays half. You both pay 7.65% for a total of 15.3%. Now, when you work for yourself, the government sees you as both the employee and the employer. So the minute you start to work for yourself, you need to pay an extra 7.65% tax on your income. Now, if you're making over $100,000 a year, that's a pretty big number.
Mhm.
And so, what an S Corp does is it requires you to split your income into a salary that you take as the employee of your company and an owner's distribution or a profit that you take as the owner of the company. And you only pay that 15.3% tax on the salary portion of your income, not the owner's distribution. So you can imagine if you're making $250,000 and you take 150,000 as the owner's distribution and pay yourself a salary of $100,000, that's 15,000-ish dollars in self-employment tax versus about $27,000 that you would pay as a sole proprietor or an LLC. So it's over $11,000 in savings right there, right off the top. And those are the kinds of things that we are able to help people understand and learn about. We have an AI accountant called Lettucehead. We have a bunch of calculators and education where you're able to come in, put your numbers into the system, and understand what your business would look like if you were working with lettuce. And so the technology raises the floor for everyone and helps everyone be
Mhm.
smarter about the kinds of deductions they can take. And then because once you're working with lettuce, because we can see what you're making, what you're paying in taxes, what your expenses are, so that we can maximize your deductions, we can make regular recommendations to you about different tax saving strategies that are right for you, that are right for your business, that are right for your income level, that you might not otherwise know about. I mean, I love my financial advisor and my accountant, but I see them a couple times a year. They don't know what's happening in my business every day. They aren't able to make proactive recommendations about what I should be doing or how I could save. And so I miss out all the time on things that I could be doing to make my business better.
Yeah, I think there's two kind of to reflect back to you what I see just from an external perspective. This lettuce can be so valuable just getting, or and if you decide to do it on your own, that's certainly another option too, right? Where it can be
Absolutely.
so valuable to stay as an LLC and file as an S corp. and gain those cost savings as a result of what Gabrielle was just sharing. And then I had already done that. So I had a CPA who, to your point, like your financial advisor had recommended that. So I did that maybe 3 or 4 years ago. It certainly wasn't 12 years ago when I first started down this path. I probably have lost a lot of money, like you were describing, Gabrielle. I just never added it up. But then as the time went on and it took advantage of this strategy of filing as an S Corp, I still had let us look at my data to see, are there optimizations. And even though I have an accountant, I have a bookkeeper, I have a financial advisor, there were still, I don't know, it was a list of 8 or 9 optimizations that Lettuce sent me that I folded back over to my CPA to help me with taking advantage of further optimization. So it's kind of like 2 points in time here. Number one, getting started. And then
Mhm.
also number two, like you said, having that real time look at what the optimization strategies could be, help to further find more costs for more tax
There are
savings.
so few people who really specialize in working with businesses like ours that they might have only a handful of clients whose businesses are like ours. And so I think that's one of the things that we bring to the table at Lettuce is we only work with businesses of one. And so it's in our best interests to have a deep expertise in this space so that we can absolutely help maximize all the different optimizations that are available to you. And I think these are not hacks, they're not tricks, they're not loopholes, they are actual legal tax saving tactics and strategies that the IRS makes available for small businesses because they want you to succeed, right? Like the government wants small businesses to succeed. We contribute a lot of money to the economy. And those money saving strategies just don't have enough awareness. There's not enough people who know about them and take advantage of them.
So important as a business owner to be able to know that these strategies exist so that then you know to go find an expert, just like we are selling our expertise to our clients, going to find an expert, whether it's lettuce or some other solution that you decide to pursue, to figure out exactly how to run this part of your business without it. Like you said, this is not most of our zone of genius, so we would need to find somewhere a tool that is the zone of genius to free up both the time but also the emotional space around it, which can be just kind of nagging there. I should know more, I should do
Yes.
more, those kinds of things. Just offload all of that.
That's
Yeah.
right. There's one of our customers is someone who I used to work with and who I've known for a long time. And I started telling him about lettuce early on and saying, like, you need this, you should do it. And he will fully admit this is not my zone of genius. He's excellent at the work he does. He loves working with his clients. But he said, for years, my back office has been, his words, a train wreck. And I asked him, why didn't you do this sooner? Why didn't you do it earlier? And his answer was, because this competes with literally
Mm,
everything else I could be doing with my free time. And it's hard to push it to the top of the list.
yeah. Yeah.
And you shouldn't have to. You should stay in your zone of genius and find another solution for this work.
Yeah, absolutely. Gabrielle, we've covered a lot of ground today. As we start to wrap up, I'm curious, is there any other just general advice you would love to share with your fellow independent consultants that we haven't touched on yet?
The thing that I often tell people at the end of webinars or talks that I give is to believe in yourself
Mm.
and you are doing a great job. There's no one out there who's going to tell you that. And so you have to tell it to yourself. And I'm going to be the first and tell you this is hard. It's really interesting. It's incredibly rewarding if you stick with it, and you're doing a great job.
Oh, that's so good. There are no more performance reviews in a business of one. So, Gabrielle just shared with you a great performance review. You're doing a great job. This is a simple business, but it's also a really hard business. So, give yourself credit for what you are accomplishing as a solo consultant, because there are a lot of people out there who would love to be doing what we're doing who haven't yet taken the plunge. So, yes, I love that. Gabrielle, tell us how to find you and anything else that you want to share in terms of your own business and lettuce as we wrap up here today.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. You can find Lettuce at lettuce.co. There's some links that'll be in the show notes for our tax calculator, for a free business assessment that we offer if you upload your tax return, and for our Q4 offer that we're running that gets you set up for 2025. And then you can find me personally. I'm easiest to find probably on LinkedIn, Gabrielle Tenaglia, and I would love to connect.
Amazing. Well, we'll put all of those links in the show notes, and so happy that you were here with us today. And I believe we're doing a webinar together in a week or so. So I'll make sure we'll put the link to that in the show notes as well. And we'll see you again soon.
Thank you so much, Melissa. It was great to join you today. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melissaliberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.